All right. Since the dawn of time, people have been throwing rocks. And since the dawn of time, people have been throwing rocks farther than somebody else. The spirit of competition has happened and to prove dominance throughout other people. This trend excelled all the way into past the Stone Age and the Bronze Age and into, let's say, when Scotland was first formed and it wasn't formed into a monarchy. There were a lot of warring clans. All right, so I would like to introduce you to a new world of the Scottish Highland Games. As a competitor in these games, I felt curiosity in the origins of the games and really came across several interesting facts. I'm positive at the conclusion of the speech, everyone will understand the true meaning of these games and will know where to go in order to attend a Scottish festival near you. Throughout the course of this speech, I will explain the archaic origins of these games, the different events and their meanings, as well as the Scottish games today. I've always lived in the theory that to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been. So let's travel back in time to when the games first started. Like I said previously, Scotland before was a land of disarray, with lots of different clans warring against each other. And in order to show their dominance without warring and killing each other off, they would do things like the Scottish games. And under that time when they were in English oppression, they weren't allowed to use weapons like swords and bows and things like that because the English would censor them in that way. So they used things like rocks and weights and logs that they would flip. These events are based on what happened in war. And as I'll illustrate in these coming pictures, you'll see how they were used. This first event is called the sheath toss. It's where you have a pitchfork, and that bale right there is generally lit on, doused in oil and lit on fire. And the idea is that you throw it up and over a wall and onto archers that are firing down on you. Yeah. All right, this is called the weight over bar. This is also a thing for archers because archers generally can't shoot directly down. So the idea was that you would have a weight. This weight is about 45 pounds, by the way. So you would take the weight, drop it below your knees, drop up, and throw it up, and it would hit in between the stone wall in order for to kill the archer that's shooting down on you. This is called the hammer throw. Generally, it's used with an actual hammer. This is just a 16-pound ball at the end of a stick. This is where you twirl it around, and since they had lack of weapons, they would use other things. And they would twirl around their head, and then they throw it into oncoming people that were trying to kill them. All right, this is called the weight toss, and let's ignore the guy's skirt flying up, but this is a 25-pound ball on the end of a chain. And similar to the hammer toss, they would twirl it around their head, and they'd make two circles to obtain velocity, and they would throw it into an oncoming attacker. This is called the caber toss. This is my favorite. It's a little unique. This is the one people generally know the Scottish games for. The idea of the caber toss is to take a log, which is generally 16 feet, and the idea was that since the mortar, the bridge across the moat was never up because they were trying to discourage the Scottish from coming into English castles. They would take the logs, drop down and flip it, and the idea is to make it perfectly straight in front of you, so that if you get a lot of people to flip it and they got them close enough together with ultimate precision, they'd create a makeshift bridge that you could travel across and then eventually breach the castle. This is called the stone put, and this is just like they would find whatever they had, use whatever they had, and they would just throw the stone as far and as hard as they could in order to kill the oncoming attacker. And so these games, they've been used to demonstrate power over the clans. But since then, after Scotland, these games kind of fell apart after Scotland broke free, and then they had its kingdom. They had their exact king and everything. So those clans, there wasn't really a need for the games. And after a while, in the name of Scottish tradition, they just kind of came back as sort of a festival and a celebration of Scottish culture. All right, clans still existed. Even though Scotland was united, the clans still existed, and rivalries never really completely died. there's still always warring, or not necessarily warring, but bad blood between the clans and things like that. Which brings me to the modern Scottish games. The first modern games, there's a little dispute as to when the first one was held, but it's generally in the beginning of the early 1800s at the Perthshire estate of Lord Whittier in Scotland. Since then, women weren't really allowed to compete because women weren't as strong back then, and they needed to take care of the farm and the kids and things like that. That's just the culture back then. But now today in the modern Scottish games, they have women competing and things like that. And since then, new events have been introduced. This particular one is called the Idiot Stone. It's 300 pounds or 250 pounds. It kind of depends on which games you go to. And it's pretty much you pick up a big rock and you throw it, and you just look stupid because it's a 250-pound rock and it only goes like 3 feet, so you look like an idiot. So they called it the Idiot Stone. Since then, it's become more organized in America. They have the SAAA, which is Scottish American Athletic Association, just headed by Dave Garvin. He grew up in Scotland and he did those games. The shirt is from one of the games at Costa Mesa. They have it every year. And anyone can come and compete. They have different classes, and they have entry level, which is called novice. That's what I competed in. And then if you go, then you can win medals. Generally, you have to wear a kilt in order to compete. I didn't have one because it failed to be brought to me today, but it's not an issue. All right, and as we've seen, the Highland Games has a much richer history with a bunch of junkmen in kilts running around and throwing things. It's much deeper than that. It has a lot of deeper meaning. I know that if any of you attend a Scottish festival, or even to compete in the games yourself, you'll find there's a little Scottish in all of us.
All right, Kirsten, what did you think?
I thought it was really good. He definitely grabbed our attention at the beginning, and I like that he had like a personal tie to it, like he had competed before, and his thesis was really clear, and he like rarely read off his paper. It was clear that he knew what he was talking about. It was really informative, and I like that he explained the history, like behind all the like different events and stuff. So that was really good.
Yeah, I like what you're doing. I do think that it gets to be a long list in that first section of all of the events, and there might be a way to cut down on some of that or organize them in particular ways. For instance, group them according to which ones are based on dealing with the wall, and group them according to which ones are based on approaching enemies or something like that. I don't know. As it is, it just feels like there's a list, and sometimes we're going... here's another one, and here's another one, and here's another one. So you got to be a little bit more creative on that. I thought your corny transition was really good. I like that. Yeah, you know. So that was pretty effective. I like the opening too. I thought that it worked well. The pictures are fine. Like I said, maybe a little too many. But you did a nice job telling a little story behind each one. I didn't hear any source citations for the material that you're presenting. I know that you probably did some research, but it doesn't. And the historical information, I think, is probably accurate, but I'm having to base it just on how well it sounds. You could just be blowing smoke up our kilt. Okay. Thank you.